So we're talking about, there's been a lot of speculation and concerns in other cities with these ICE raids
Hmm.
and, the work that goes into that and the presence of federal immigration officers. So actually, Chief, I want to start with you. If one of those raids, one of those searches happen from those federal immigration officers, what would be called upon or what would be expected from Cincinnati police?
So there's a lot that would come into that decision making. So if they are here simply to enforce somebody's immigration status, that is not our role. If they are here and an individual has, say, a criminal warrant on them, maybe they're wanted for a murder or rape or something to that effect, and ICE needs our assistance in apprehending that individual, we would assist with that.
And Mayor, what was the expectations for you in regards to a lot of these conversations? Because I think there's been a lot of speculation and a
Yeah.
lot of unknown because people have watched what's happened in some of the bigger cities like LA, Chicago,
Yeah.
New York, and Philadelphia.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's important because given all of the activity in Washington, D.C., whether it's on immigration, on DEI, on a freeze of federal grants, there's just a lot of confusion. A lot is changing quickly. And so the chief and I really wanted to drive some clarity and try and inform the public about what the city's role is, which is, I think, a completely reasonable question. And it's important to know, first of all, that nothing has changed. Our policies, our procedures are the same today as they were 3 or 4 years ago. What we want folks to understand is, of course, the chief and I are going to follow the law. And as the chief just articulated, the federal immigration laws do not have space for local municipalities to enforce those federal immigration laws. That is entirely ICE's purview. And so CPD officers won't be going in and checking people's immigration status. If there is violence or the threat of violence or potential for violence, or if the person being targeted is charged with a violent crime, then of course CPD will be available in a support capacity to maintain law and order, to maintain public safety, which is going to continue to be the chief and I's #1 priority.
Mayor, I think some of the questions arose this morning, given I know what you had spoken to some of my colleagues at other stations, and your phrase about cooperation. And I think I just wanted to ask you, when you made those statements yesterday, what you meant by that, and if this is more of a clarification on what you believe, and Chief, you as well, the role of your department and your officers in regards to any potential use
Yeah.
or collaboration with federal law enforcement.
Well, that's why I wanted to have the conversation with you, because it's very important to be very specific about what the law is and what CPD's role is. Now, if you take cooperation as maintaining safety, and if there's a federal district court order, regardless of someone's immigration status, and they're violent, of course CPD is going to act on a federal court order. But if you believe cooperation means specifically checking people's immigration status, then no, that is specifically ICE's purview and role. So I think it's important to be very clear about what the law is, which is ICE enforces immigration status, and CPD, of course, is here to maintain law and order and safety. And to the extent that that requires CPD's presence, of course, they'll be there.
And Chief, have you gotten any questions from your own officers over the last week since the new administration began office? Has there been any confusion amongst your staff as to regards to what their role could be in the future?
Yeah, so I have not gotten any specific questions from officers, but just like everybody else, I've been watching the coverage on this. There is a lot of confusion out there to the general public, to the migrants in our community, and so I have to assume that the officers might have some confusion as well. And so that's why we're taking steps, having this interview with you. I will be putting out some messaging to the officers soon on where we stand on this issue as a department.
And it's important to know that as the chief and I were talking, ICE hasn't reached out to us. ICE hasn't kind of contacted the chief in her time in that capacity. And so the chief and I are working very hard with the administration to understand and play out these various hypotheticals that may come to pass, given the administration's focus on immigration. But the chief and I have been in lockstep that public safety is our top priority. So if you're violent, irrespective of your immigration status, we are going to hold you accountable.
Has there ever been any kind of contact from the Department of Homeland Security?
There is not. There's not. In my whole tenure as police chief, ICE has not reached out to me for any kind of assistance, particularly in the recent couple of weeks. We've not had any conversations.
And Mayor, what would your message be to anyone watching and who has those questions? What can they do to try to get at least some answers? Because we've seen, I don't know if you saw some of the comments from teachers and parents in CPS's meeting on Monday, a lot of fear, a lot of concern, and it's literally having an effect inside the classroom that attendance is down. What would you say to some people who are just looking for an answer?
Yeah, the other thing I would add, the consequence of this that is very near and dear to the chief's and I's heart, which is we need the trust of our community members in order to, whether they're a victim or a witness to violent crime, to come forward. And in addition to the chilling effect it's having on student attendance in CPS, we're also worried that we're going to have that same chilling effect on violent crime that may be happening in these more vulnerable populations. So that is certainly a concern. My message to folks who are worried about what is happening or what may happen to themselves or family members is to reach out to the Immigration, Refugee, and Law Center, reach out to Catholic Charities, and reach out to legal aid. There are lots of packets of information for folks to understand what their rights are, to understand what the process is. To the extent that folks who are worried about their children, to the extent that they can work to get them documentation that proves that they're a citizen, whether it be a passport, et cetera. I think all of those are good processes and strategies to pursue. But ultimately, again, if ICE is going to prioritize Cincinnati, there is no requirement for them to let us know about that. And so a lot of the planning that we're doing from a law enforcement perspective is how are we going to respond if that happens, from not just a public safety perspective, but also from mitigating the potential harm to the community.
And Chief, I don't know if you can go, Mayor, if this is a question for you, but Chief, I wanted to ask you, there's been some kind of conversation on actually how a sanctuary city works now. Cincinnati is a sanctuary city. What does go into play in regards to the possible law enforcement and immigration status from your understanding?
So I will tell you, when Cincinnati was declared a sanctuary city with a previous administration, it did not change how we police the city at all. And to date, nothing has changed. Sanctuary city or not, we police in the same manner that we always have.
Any other questions?
I do have one thing for
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Sam. So actually 2 points I'd like to stress. One is we have worked very hard for over 10 years to build a rapport with our Hispanic population in the city of Cincinnati. We have data that shows they are often victims of crime and extremely unreported to the police department. So we've worked hard to build that relationship so that they feel comfortable coming forward and reporting when they've become a victim of a crime. I want them to know we are still here for them in that capacity, and we always will be. In addition to that, many in our Hispanic community know we have an immigrant liaison officer, Officer Anthony Johnson. He is still a resource for the immigrant population as we try to navigate through all of this.
Anything else you'd like to add, Mayor?
Jack has a note. I can't see it. You want to show me your?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Can I make one final point?
Absolutely,
I apologize. With all the confusion happening at the national level and the impact on the local level, I do want to reiterate just how grateful the Chief and I are for the countless men and women in uniform who are providing the public safety, providing the clarity for vulnerable communities like we're talking about, but for all of our communities. It's an incredibly highly scrutinized job. It's a very difficult job. And I want to reiterate that the Chief and I will always support our law enforcement officers, provide them the resources necessary to do their job. And it's important that we drive clarity as much as possible so that they can effectively lead our city from a public safety perspective.
Actually, Mayor, I do have one more question.
Sure.
And now that you bring it up, I understand obviously the two of you have been collaborating and speaking today. We're speaking about this right now. I understand that the president of the Fraternal Order of Police was pretty upset by some of the things that you said yesterday.
Yeah.
What other conversations have you had, with the chief, with other members of law enforcement to really understand where everything is at?
Well, the chief and I obviously are the primary relationship there as she leads the entire police force. But I talked to Ken this morning, and I have a really good relationship with Ken. Obviously, we don't always see eye to eye, but the FOP is an important organization sharing the views and perspectives of the men and women in the police department. I've also had good conversations with Charmaine McGuffey, the sheriff. I know that the chief, the city manager, and the sheriff are hoping to connect soon on kind of coordinating our services. I've spoken to Catholic Charities and also Legal Aid, and I've reached out to the superintendent at CPS to offer our services and support there as well. So we're trying to create very quickly a community-wide response, not just from a law enforcement perspective, but also from a social services perspective.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Chief, Mayor, anything else?
No, again, to the mayor's point, I just want to thank the men and women of CPD. They go out and do a tough job every single day. So to have this topic on top of what they've always dealt with, that's why I need to provide them some clarity, and I'll be doing that very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure speaking.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.